Well, I got a text this past week from my dad. If you were here, I made a joke. I forget why, actually. But I called out the fact that my dad is bald. And so he texted me and he let me know what he felt about that. So I think he's watching right now. So, Dad, happy Father's Day. I'm sorry that you're bald, but I still love you. I've heard, from what I understand of biology and all that one inherits for males their hair from their mother's dad. So hopefully I won't go bald, but we'll find out though. So anyways, hey, as Juno mentioned, can you believe it? We've been in this series for 5 months, and today is our last Sunday going through the letter of 1 Corinthians. And so if you haven't been here for this whole series and today is your first Sunday, welcome. Thank you for coming. My name is Mark Lohman, and I'm the associate pastor here at New Life. And we're glad that you could just make it even for just the last one. All of the sermons on this series, and in fact, any sermon on a Sunday morning is posted on our website. So feel free to go back and rewatch them, anything you want to do of that nature. And a couple other housekeeping things. So there is a chapter 16 in this book. We're fully aware of that. It wasn't a mistake. Paul deals with some more peripheral matters, so we'll let you on your own kind of read through that if you wish, but I'm actually going to pick up exactly where I ended last Sunday. If you were here, you know that last Sunday was about the resurrection, and as is this Sunday, so there's kind of a little part 1 and part 2 going on. So I ended last Sunday with this question. I said, hey, you know, even if you don't believe in the resurrection, which a lot of people don't, all right, it seems crazy to them, that at least you should want it to be true. And part of the reason why I think that's the case, because doesn't it seem like that this is our home? That we don't want to leave here. Like under normal circumstances, of course, there are some times where you do want to leave, but under normal circumstances, we enjoy life as it is here. And so have you ever been on a trip that's just completely miserable, right? Where everyone gets sick or everything goes wrong that can go wrong. And what do you just want to do? You just want to go home. And so for me, a couple weeks ago, I shared last Sunday, we were in Indiana for a couple weeks. My wife had emergency appendix surgery, and so it just got crazy and hectic, and we ended up staying out there for 4 or 5 days longer. And all I wanted to do was I just wanted to go home, right? That's all I wanted to do. So we got home on a Monday night, unlocked the door, and right when I walked in, I just kind of had this sigh of relief. I know this place, right? So there's a couple things I look forward to when I go home. The first of which is my hybrid memory foam mattress with memory foam pillows that perfectly take the shape of my head. I cannot wait to go home to do that. Second thing, I love to go home because I love coffee, but I want to make it exactly the way that I want my cup of coffee in the morning. So, couldn't wait for that. Third thing, we'll find out if this is just me or not. I couldn't wait just to use my own shower. I don't know, I have this thing at hotels, other people, I can never get the right temperature on the shower, or it sprays out weird, and it's just this is just a weird shower. Anybody else have those problems? Okay, yes. Maybe Juno's the only one that doesn't. Whatever. And I just want to put on tank tops, sweats, sit on the couch, watch SportsCenter. So as one author puts it, home, it's about comfort, right? It's our reference point, what you want to come back to. And I think the craving for home, it's a pretty deep, sweet feeling that we have. And so no matter how many adventures that we go away from, you usually at the end just want to go home. Knowing that we can go home keeps us going. Well, many Christians have thought and said for a while that going to heaven is like going home. The problem with that is that I think a lot of us have these really innate, deep desires that you'll want to stay here. Right? You just know in your bones that you like life as is. And so I mentioned last week, hey, things like looking at a sunset at Laguna Beach. Right? Maybe going to just your favorite coffee store. Maybe looking at the Grand Canyon and seeing the majesty of it. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I'm in those situations, I don't want to leave. And since it's Father's Day, they're the most important things, the most beautiful thing in life, sports. When I'm watching Game 7 tonight, if the Warriors win, man, life's good. I don't want to leave. Now, if LeBron and that whole thing, if they win, I will not be a happy camper. But home is our comfort, okay? Here's the problem, though. We also know that there's something profoundly wrong with this place. Mass shootings, cancer, multiple sclerosis. List goes on. This world is utterly broken, and death always seems to have the last word. And so as a recap of last week, many of the ancient Corinthians in this church that we've been journeying with, they want to leave this good but tarnished creation. And so in their mind, here's what they were thinking. They wanted to go off to heaven, and heaven was this purely non-physical, spiritual, immaterial realm. And this is what they wanted. And so they denied the resurrection of the dead, which, as we learned last week, literally means the rising of your corpse. That's what Paul says in the Greek. They wanted to leave this place. They didn't want their body back. This whole idea of the resurrection of the dead, it wasn't even desirous for them because this world is full of pain and suffering. Why would you even want to stay here? They wanted to flee, to escape from this place. Paul corrects them and he says, hey, if that's the case, if you're thinking things through, then that actually means that death wins and God loses. He corrects their denial of the resurrection of the dead and says, hey, this is like the very gospel, the good news of Jesus. Your faith stands on this belief that Jesus was resurrected from the grave. So all that to say, here's the problem. Our desire for home is not the problem. The problem is death. The problem is sin and death. And so the solution isn't to leave this place, to flee, to escape. The problem that needs to be fixed is sin and death. Now, I can't believe I'm going to use this analogy, but it's to use a popular TV show metaphor, Extreme Makeover Home Edition. Lord, forgive me for this. And no, I don't watch that show. But this world, this earth that we live on is kind of like the lot that a house sits on in those shows. The problem isn't the lot, it isn't the land that the house sits on. The problem is the house. It's old, it's decaying. The house needs an extreme makeover. That's what the resurrection of the dead is. And so Jesus' resurrection, I'm almost done with the recap, I know, hang with me here. Jesus' resurrection means, and it shows, that this place, physical reality, is our home. Human beings, we are physical creatures. God made us that way. He didn't have to. We could have been like angels. No, human beings are embodied physical creatures. We were made to be here. And so this idea that's crept into the church, no, we want to flee, we want to escape, and heaven's this notion of sitting on a cloud, playing a harp, and singing songs forever. That's actually something that culture has taught us about what home is. That's not what the scriptures teach us. And it is so much bigger and better. And just to be clear, as I said last week, if you're a follower of Jesus, yes, when you die, you go immediately to be in the presence of Jesus. Absolutely, amen, and hallelujah. Let me be clear on that. And that is a spiritual existence. But that's not the end of the game. When Jesus comes back, he will resurrect all of our bodies, and we will reign with him on this physically transformed earth. So, that's the recap of last week. Hopefully you're hanging with me. Here's what goes on this Sunday for part 2. Paul, brilliant dude, okay, brilliant guy. He's already anticipating what the Corinthians are going to ask. And maybe it's the question that you're asking since last Sunday or this morning, and it's this. How in the world is our body going to be resurrected? Like, what is that going to even look like? That's exactly what Paul addresses. So we're going to go ahead and turn to 1 Corinthians for the very last time, if you can believe it or not. So chapter 15, starting at verse 35, I'll be reading from these free Bibles that are underneath the chairs in front of you. Page 801. Paul writes, and we'll have it on the screens, but someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? So here's the driving question for this passage. They're like, okay, Paul, you're saying that we're going to get our bodies back. Couple problems. A, how the heck is that going to happen? And what is that even going to look like? And so he gives them 3 quick analogies, 3 quick metaphors, and we're going to cruise through these. Verse 37, he says this, or verse 36, excuse me. And Paul, as always, is full of attitude. He says, how foolish. What you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And when you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just the seed, perhaps of wheat or of something else. But God gives it a body as he is determined, and to each kind of seed, he gives its own body. Okay, we'll stop there. I used to never get why people got so into gardening and planting seeds into the bare ground until a couple months ago, my wife decided to pick up this hobby. And it's been amazing. I got to tell you, we have this little cemented backyard, and now it's just like Easter. I mean, it's just bright, colorful plants and flowers everywhere. It's awesome. And so this got me thinking, okay, why is this? Why do we love gardening, okay? And I think one of the reasons, there could be many, but I think one is, there is something to this process of taking a bare little seed, and you put it into the ground, and then you water it, you till it, and then days, weeks, months later, whatever it is, this plant just shoots up. And it looks nothing like the little seed that went into the ground. And so Paul says, hey, you Corinthians, why don't you just look around you at the plant life? You guys know how plants work. You garden. You put a dead seed into the ground, nothing happens. And then before you know it, something that looks nothing like the seed comes from that and shoots up out of the ground. He says, hey, the resurrection of the body is a parallel experience to gardening. So he's like, hey, don't get so offended that this idea of the resurrection of the body is ludicrous. No, you see it in the very plant life. And so one other thing to point out on this, there is no visual likeness between a little seed and then the big plant that comes from it. They don't look the same, right? I mean, think of the little black seeds, watermelon seeds. They turn into 5-pound red and green melons. That's what Paul's saying. He says, hey, look at how you garden. And so what we plant in the soil and what grows out of it looks nothing like it, but, here's the point, there is physical continuity. Somehow that seed turns into a plant. The watermelon comes from the watermelon seed. The dead body of ours that gets buried into the ground or cremated, somehow, some way, comes up a resurrected body. Point 2, Paul moves on. He says this in verse 39. Not all flesh is the same, People have one kind of flesh, animals have another, birds another, and fish another. Real quick, here's what Paul's saying here. He's saying, hey, if God can make all these different types of bodies, and just look around, look at humans, look at animals, look at fish, look at birds, then of course he can make another type of body, the resurrected body. Point 3, his analogy, verse 40 is this. There are also heavenly bodies like mine, and there are also earthly bodies like yours. Man, we're a dead crowd this morning. No pun intended. Wake up, people. Okay. Verse 40, we'll read that again. There are also heavenly bodies and there are earthly bodies, but the splendor of the heavenly bodies is one kind, and the splendor of the earthly bodies is another. The sun has one kind of splendor, the moon another, and the stars another, and stars differ from star to star in splendor. Third point, he says, hey, all the different bodies in this universe, they have different types of glory, different types of splendor. Human beings do not radiate out like a star. Okay? There's different types of glory, different types of brilliance of bodies in this place. And here's this point. Hey, your body right now, it may not seem like that cool, that glorious, that magnificent, but your resurrected body will be. It'll be full of glory. This is his point. He says, verse 42, so it will be with the resurrection of the dead. Now, Paul is going to contrast your physical body now to what it's going to be like when Jesus comes back. He says this, the body that is sown is perishable, and this is the seed planting metaphor. It's raised imperishable. It's sown in dishonor, and your new body is raised in glory. Your body now is sown in weakness, but then it'll be raised in power. This is the body that you've always wanted. And no, ladies, I'm not talking about, some Baywatch actress body, or guys, does anybody here remember, I think it was the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. They had those Bowflex, exercise equipment commercials, and guys would work out and flames come off their biceps, and then they say, are you ready? Anybody here remember those? Okay, yes. Merv, I got you. I see you. Okay, dudes, not that type of body. What Paul's saying is this. It's not going to be a body like that you have now, which is full of decay, which is going to die, which is dishonorable, which is weak, which is perishable. No, the body that you always wanted, the body that you're going to get, is a body that's full of glory, that's full of honor, that doesn't die, that you're not ashamed of. And so there'll be no need for Tylenol, for knee braces, doctors. If you're a doctor now, you will be unemployed when Jesus comes back. True story. That's what the scriptures say. So, hey, is church fun? Can we laugh? Thank you. Okay. Verse 44, let's continue. This is where it gets a little tricky. Paul writes, he says, hey, it's sown a natural body, it's raised a spiritual body. Okay, this is technical. Hang with me here. Paul in the Greek uses some pretty technical terms here that are hard to translate into English. When we hear the phrases natural body and spiritual body, you're probably already thinking, I would think this. The natural body is physical, spiritual body, non-physical, like a ghost, like an angel, something of that nature. Hear me loud and clear. That's not what Paul is getting at. Otherwise, he wouldn't be calling it a body. What he's getting at is this. He's comparing your body now, your body to be, and he's saying they run on two different types of fuel, two different types of energy. They're animated in two different ways. And I'm going to unpack this. He says your current body, your natural body, Okay, what we know now that's, run by blood circulating and oxygen coming in and going out and all of that kind of fun stuff, that's a natural body, and it runs on oxygen and it runs on all these other things. A couple verses later, he's going to call that same thing an earthly body, the body that Adam had, okay? In contrast to this is a spiritual body. He's not saying it's non-physical. He's just saying that it's going to run on God's Spirit, which is why it's called spiritual. Your new body is going to be fueled, it's going to be animated, it's going to be energized by the living breath of God. Okay, that probably seems really weird, and so let me give a metaphor. It's just for all the fathers out there. It's Father's Day, okay? So we're going to use a man metaphor. The natural body that you have now, it's almost as though it's run on, its fuel is the oil and gas from Arco. Now, if there's any Arco employees or fans out here, I get my gas from Arco, okay? So I'm your customer. It's a little bit cheaper though, right? Okay. God's saying, hey, that's your body now, your natural body. Your spiritual body that you're gonna get, it's gonna be run by the good stuff. Chevron with Techron. Chevron with Techron, man, that makes your car run good, right? It never breaks down. I don't even know if that's true or not. That's what they say. Here's what he's saying. Natural body, it's animated, it's energized by things that are eventually going to run out. Your new body is going to be animated by the Spirit of God, and it's not going to run out. It's the Chevron with Techron. So, pretty heady, pretty abstract stuff. We're almost done with the tough stuff. Hang on here. Paul, he builds on this, he keeps on going, and he's going to continue to compare your body now, which you inherited from Adam, and then the body to be when Jesus comes back. He says this. Verse 45. So it is written, the first man, Adam, from the book of Genesis, became a living being. The last Adam, Jesus, a life-giving spirit. That's the Chevron with Techron stuff. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and after that, the spiritual. The first man, Adam, was of the dust of the earth. The second man, Jesus, is of heaven. As was the earthly man, so are those of us who are of the earth. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are of heaven. And just as we've borne the image of the earthly man, so shall we bear the image of the heavenly man. Okay, here's all he's saying. We talked about it last week. What happened to Adam, first book of the Bible, Genesis, how it all starts. His body was, he sinned and then entered corruption and decay and pain and suffering. We have inherited that from Adam. That's our bodies now. But Jesus' resurrection, the second Adam, Jesus does what Adam should have but didn't. That body reverses the curse of Adam's body. It undoes, it reverses, it switches back to the things should have been. So, do you see the contrast Paul is making? Adam's body, earthly body, your body now, Jesus' resurrected body, which is what yours will be like when he comes back. So, I'm going to summarize so far because I know this is a lot, and I want us to get this. This is really important. Paul's telling the Corinthians then and us now, first, look around you. You actually see the way resurrection works in the plant life. A bare seed goes in, comes out a different plant. Secondly, look at all the different bodies in this world. Stars, moon, sun, animals, birds, fish. There's a ton of different ones. Why couldn't God just make another one? Thirdly, there's different types of glory in the bodies. Your body's not glorious now, but it will be. It'll be just like Jesus's when he was raised from the dead. So just as we inherited Adam's body, so we will inherit Jesus' body. Not actually, but a body like his. This is the body that you always wanted. A body that does not die. A body that doesn't experience anxiety, depression, knee problems, back problems, a body that you're not embarrassed about. Paul continues, verse 50. I declare to you, brothers and sisters, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. By flesh and blood, a really common Jewish phrase at that time, it just means your mortal existence. He's not saying that your new body is not going to have flesh or blood. Nope, Jesus is dead. Ours will too. He told Thomas, look at the scars in my hand. You can touch them. He's just saying, flesh and blood now, your body dies and decays. If you're to live in God's new world, you need a body that's going to be able to survive in there. Our bodies now, they're not fit, they're not suitable for eternal life. He's saying you need a resurrected, imperishable body. So, when will this happen, Paul? Tell us. We want to know. Verse 51. Listen, I tell you a mystery. And I'm like Paul. This whole chapter has been a mystery, bro. This isn't the only mystery. We will not all sleep. We will not all die. Some people will be alive when Jesus comes back. But we will all be changed. So if Jesus comes back in 5 seconds from now, 5,000 years from now, we don't know when. If you're alive when he comes back, your body will be changed at that moment. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed, will be transformed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with the immortality. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with the immortality, then the saying that is written will come true. This is what you have to get. Paul is going to quote 2 Old Testament passages. And he is going to taunt, he's going to make fun of, and he is going to talk trash to death. Death has been swallowed up in victory. We sang this a couple songs ago. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Do you see the way that Paul talks about death? Is death your friend? No, it's your enemy. Verse 26, last week, he says, death is the last enemy, and Jesus is going to destroy it. This week, verses 54, 56. He mocks it, he taunts it, he talks trash to it. Death is not your friend. Death is our enemy. Now, maybe that seems obvious to you. I'm not sure if we get this. Here's what I mean. Do you understand that death is your enemy? Because I think a lot of us need to relearn how to grieve. Need to relearn how to hope. Do you grieve? What I mean by that is, there is something weird that Christians do in the church. We think it's ungodly to grieve. Oh, why are you grieving? He or she is in a better place now. Oh, that must mean that you have a weak faith. You can't be honest here with your emotions. No. Go read the Psalms, poetry, hymn book of the scriptures. The authors, they just lament and they are angry at God and they express that emotion. As a quick plug, next Sunday we start a new series, Summer in the Psalms. We are going to be exploring the emotions that we have And God calls us to be transparent and to bring those before him. It is okay to grieve. I find it fascinating. Jesus, book of John, his best friend, one of his best friends is Lazarus. He dies. Jesus shows up to his body, and what does he do? He weeps. The shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. God cried. And that's even in the context. He knew that he was going to resurrect Lazarus. And he still weeps. And so I don't want to be insensitive this morning, but I couldn't tell you how many funerals I've been to, how many stories I've heard. And this will happen to all of us. So let's be sober. Death is inevitable, and many of us have lost loved ones. But how many times have I heard at a funeral, "Oh, it's okay, Mark. It was God's plan. Oh, he or she's in a better place now." What? Really? You're going to treat death like some cheesy, cliche, Hallmark card? If that's all we have to say about death, we have missed what Paul says here. Death is our enemy. I just heard a story this past week. The son, his father is dying of cancer. His father is withering. I mean, it is brutal. It is embarrassing, it's dishonoring, and it's humiliating for his dad. And this lovely, kind little couple, great hearts, looks at the son and says, "Well, I guess it was just part of God's plan." No, it's not. Death is not part of God's plan. Multiple sclerosis, mass shootings from hate, cancer, birth defects, those are not God's plan. Eden is God's plan. Human beings flourishing in a garden with intimacy with God and with each other. That's where he's taking us. That's where the story is going. That's why you need new bodies. He's making all things new. The scriptures say that death is an enemy. And for us to talk about and to treat it any other way is to miss how foreign it should be to us. Every time that we protest death, sickness, disease, oppression, the unfairness of life, Christian or not, we are bearing witness to the truth that we were not made for this. And we hunger for the resurrection of the dead, for Jesus to come back and to set everything right. Now, can God bring good out of evil? Absolutely. Look at the cross, the most evil thing done, and he's resurrected. So if by saying this is a part of God's plan, if by that you mean God is in control, yes, absolutely. God is 4,000% in control. And he does bring good out of evil, life out of death. But when you hear that phrase, "Oh, I guess it's God's plan," I'm not sure if that's the way we mean it. God does not desire, he does not will death, sin, and everything else. Let's be careful how we use our words. And I think this is why we need to relearn how to hope. Paul, in a different letter, he says this: "We grieve, We can't skip that. We grieve, but not as those who have no hope. Our version of hope is something like this. Hey, hope to see you in heaven. Hey, I hope heaven's great for you as you sit on the cloud, play a harp, and sing songs forever. That's weak. Followers of Jesus can look death in the face, and you know that you're getting your body back because Jesus was risen from the grave, and he will do the same for you. We take comfort in knowing that Jesus has already defeated death. Jesus is alive. He is well. We serve a risen Lord. All of our losses here will be resurrected. What we go through, we will come out the other side. Jesus, he's back from the dead. Anything is possible. The powers of sin and death and hell, they've been snapped in half. We are people of hope. We know how the story ends. Are you a person of hope who grieves but who hopes? You know what happens in the end. Is there hope in your marriage, in your family, with your kids, with your friends, in death, in disease, in sickness? I love how Paul ends this chapter. We have one verse left. Verse 58. At this point, he spends 57 verses. Dense, abstract, sophisticated, but absolutely spectacular. And yet think that at the end he says something like, hey, let's be full of joy for the hope that's set before us. That's not the way he ends. He talks about the here and now. He says this, therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. At least me, what an unclimactic way to end such a powerful chapter, but so practical. If you remember last week, we talked about what you believe in the future shapes the way you live now. Paul is bringing that back up again. He's saying this, if Jesus has been risen from the grave, and then that means that we will too, you're getting your body back. God is going to transform this earth. Romans 8, Revelations 22, Isaiah 66. If that is true, then what you do now matters. Just as we will be carried over from the old world to the new world, so will our labor. In a sense, just as your bodies will be resurrected, so will your service for Jesus. Life and work are in vain if there's no resurrection, if there's no continuity. But we have meaning, we have purpose, we have direction because Jesus has risen from the grave. Remember, look at the plants all around you. Seed goes in the ground and it comes up something different. Now, so there's absolutely, there's discontinuity there, right? The seed and the plant, they don't look the same. There's no visual likeness. But there is also continuity and connection, and this is a mystery, that's what Paul says. What is true of that seed that goes into the ground, it's somehow mysteriously a part of, and it's kept, and it's turned into those big 5-pound red and green melons. So the same for your body, and so the same for your labor, your work, your service. This is probably pretty abstract for you, so I'm going to end on a quote that unpacks this, okay? We'll have it on the screens. N.T. Wright, he's a well-known theologian. He says this: "You are not oiling the wheels of a machine that's about to roll over a cliff. You are not restoring a great painting that's shortly going to be thrown on the fire. You are not planting roses in a garden that's about to be dug up for a building site. You are, strange though it may seem, almost as hard to believe as the resurrection itself. You're accomplishing something that will become in due course part of God's new world." And listen to this: every act of love, gratitude, and kindness, every work of art or music inspired by the love of God and delight in the beauty of his creation, every minute spent teaching a severely handicapped child to read or to walk, and every act of care and nurture, of comfort and support for one's fellow human beings, and of course, every prayer, all spirit-led teaching, every deed that spreads the gospel and that builds up the church, that embraces and embodies holiness rather than corruption, and makes the name of Jesus honored in the world. All of this will find its way through the resurrecting power of God and to the new creation that God will one day make. So, brothers and sisters, in light of the resurrection, here's the question for us, and this is it, and the band's going to come up now. Are you giving yourselves fully to the work of the Lord? Because you know that your labor in Jesus is not in vain. That's the question for us. That's the way Paul ends. Here's how another translation puts it, and I love this. Don't hold back. Are you throwing yourself into the work of Jesus, confident that nothing you do for him is a waste of time or effort? Don't hold back. Throw yourself into the work of Jesus, confident that nothing that you do is a waste of time and effort. Jesus is resurrected, and he's resurrecting you. And so we're going to lead in just to a response time like we do every Sunday morning. There's so many ways to respond. Let the Spirit lead you. And so we'll have communion up here to be reminded of the death, the sacrifice that Jesus made for us. No matter what you've done, at the cross, you're free. We'll have a prayer team by the organ who will pray for anything. You need prayer this morning, we want to pray for you. There's candles to signify the hope of Jesus in a dark place. And at this time, the ushers will come forward to collect our offering. If you're new here, you don't need to give. If New Life is your home or you feel encouraged to give, please, we use this money to bring new life to the city. So I invite the ushers up at this time.